Engulfed by faith, I failed to foresee the looming deception of Jenna. Our lives, once a melodious union with Jenna, transformed into a discordant web of deceit. "How could you?" I exclaimed, my voice echoing disbelief and sadness as Jenna's silence resounded with its own symphony of accusations. Lies and secrets spun a shroud, eroding the love we once shared. This is my narrative of betrayal and pursuit of truth. I hope you find it captivating. It was only through separation and our 3-year-old daughter that I began to comprehend what I had been denying. I wished to evade it. As long as I could, I turned a blind eye. But then it was undeniable. We were bidding farewell to my grandfather, who had succumbed to heart failure, and our 3-year-old Alyssa was by my side. We were at my mother's house the day after the farewell, preparing to depart. The luggage was all loaded in the car. I was helping Alyssa into her seat. "Shall we take off your shoes, sweetheart?" I asked, knowing she would agree. "Yes, please," she replied with clarity and seriousness. I smiled as I began to remove her petite shoes, foregoing any inquiry about socks since she typically dislikes them. It was my preference too. I find comfort in going barefoot rather than wearing hot, confining shoes. Her delight was evident as she wiggled her toes after her socks were off. Anticipating her response, I tickled her feet, knowing she'd respond with laughter and playful kicks. She seemed content only when I engaged in this activity. Our shared laughter had become more frequent recently, a source of joy for both of us. My little girl and I cherished our moments together, unlike my relationship with Laura. Before I could ponder further, Alyssa stopped me with her question. "Daddy?" she asked, worry evident in her voice. I looked down at her as I placed her shoes nearby. "What's the matter, sweetie?" I asked gently when she fell silent. Her eyes held a simple question. "Why doesn't Mommy seem to love us anymore?" This statement left me stunned. I gazed at my child, speechless. "Sweetheart, your mother truly adores us both immensely," I murmured softly. "More than anyone else in the world, her affection is for you." For a brief moment, I perceived a glimmer of light within her eyes, but it swiftly faded. "Yet, she wasn't with us to bid farewell to Grandpa," she said sorrowfully. Unable to provide a comforting response, all I could offer was what Laura had shared. "She had work to attend to, dear." I pondered disclosing the demanding job at my wife's workplace that occupied her time, but deemed it too complex for a 3-year-old to comprehend. The silence lingered. "Your mother will be there upon our return, waiting for you." Alyssa inquired, "Does she work during the night as well?" I began to reply negatively, but thoughts of her mother venturing out at night with friends complicated matters. Once again, it would have prompted more questions than I could respond to. "No, my dear," I said gently. "I believe your mother will soon no longer need to work so much. Then she'll have much more time for you and me." I yearned to bring the conversation to a close. The journey was tough. I secured the final buckle on the car seat, planted a kiss on my cherished daughter's cheek, and tapped her arm before closing the door. 20 minutes later, she was sound asleep in the back seat as I navigated the highway. While my daughter slumbered, my thoughts remained awake. I couldn't shake off her melancholic words. If a 3-year-old had noticed, it wasn't just me. That's what my spouse suggested when I asked about her frequent outings with friends. The sun was nearing its descent as we returned home. My wife Laura was indeed there. Alyssa darted upstairs, brimming with joy and excited tales of the cousins she saw at my parents'. I followed, my mind preoccupied with dismal reflections from our drive home. Why was my spouse always engaged in work or socializing? I found Laura by her vanity mirror, applying makeup in her underwear. She turned to greet me with a quick peck and hello. It struck me that I couldn't remember the last time she gave a passionate kiss or a tight embrace to express affection. On our bed, I observed as Alyssa attempted conversation with her, but she didn't appear to listen, and shortly thereafter, our daughter retreated to her room in silence. Laura continued with her makeup, fully engrossed in its application. "What's going on, Laura?" I inquired cautiously without revealing my distress. My abdomen contracted, and I felt a wave of heat. It was difficult for me to breathe. "What do you mean?" she replied, still fiddling with her eyeshadow. She noticed my agitation, but didn't pause in her makeup routine. "We've barely been home for 10 minutes," I said gruffly. "And you're leaving again." She halted on her eyelash brush, looking irritated. "Darling, you're aware that I meet the girls on Fridays, right?" she said wearily. The way she spoke and its implications left me uneasy. "However, in reality, you're out with them on Saturdays, many Sundays, almost every Wednesday, and nearly every Friday for happy hour. These occasions often stretch into one long, arduous night." After Alyssa retreated to her room following her mother's dismissal, the door closed behind her. Up from my sleep, a toy tune played, prompting me to rise. I closed the bedroom door and found Laura awake, gazing at me with an unreadable expression, moving swiftly. Approaching her, I took both her hands in mine, holding them tight against my chest. "Laura," I whispered softly, trying to maintain control over my voice. "Alyssa had asked today why you didn't love us anymore, and I needed to know the same." Laura's eyes narrowed slightly, hinting I'd intruded upon a sensitive topic. I persisted, asking, "Do you still love me?" My wife of 6 years, after a moment of silence, released a clear display of sadness and leaned into me. "Yes, dear," she said softly, "I love you even more than when we got married." The happiness I felt threatened to overwhelm me. Despite my knotted stomach, I attempted to compose myself. "Stay home tonight, dear," I suggested, pushing aside my doubts. I maintained a composed tone in my speech. Laura sighed, placing a comforting hand on me and patting my chest. "Let's put Alyssa to bed early," I suggested. "Dim the lights and bring out the wine we've been saving. You could wear that black lace top I bought for Valentine's Day. How about that?" Strangely, her body responded positively to my idea until I mentioned that. Then she stiffened and tried to move away. I held on to her wrists, preventing her from going too far. "Laura," I asked deliberately, "are you seeing someone else?" As I spoke, I observed a subtle change in her eyes, a brief flash of something there. Her gaze shifted quickly, and for a moment I saw it. I heard a sharp intake of breath as she gasped. What remained was a rapid pulse that I could feel under my fingers. I was holding her wrists, and my fingertips were on her main arteries. It was as effective a lie detector as any, I realized then. "Don't be foolish," my wife replied. "Sweetheart, I could only love you, you know that." She drew nearer, rested her head on my shoulder, and breathed gently against my neck, planting occasional kisses. Her hair remained undisturbed as her head didn't fully press into me. Did Laura sense the chill coursing through me? Laura touched my arms and retreated, glancing at the clock by the bed. "I'm tardy," she said. "I promised my companions I wouldn't delay any longer. I must depart." "Yet, perhaps tomorrow night," she suggested gently. "Laura, we need moments alone," I replied, revealing my irritation. "Postpone your rendezvous with your friends and remain with me and our child," I proposed. "How about that, please?" I attempted. She approached her wardrobe, selected a short skirt. "I can't disappoint my associates," she said. "Why would you do so?" she retorted sharply. "Why would you desert me and our child?" I countered. "Don't we matter to you?" My wife's eyes flashed as anger surged within us alike. "Tomorrow," she barked. "Blast it, I crave personal time without you constantly present and making me feel confined. I'm not your property." We quarreled further. She asserted her independence in our union. I informed her I wouldn't control her, giving her freedom to unwind after a tough workday. I pointed out my past leniency, like when she resumed work post our baby's birth. Despite our financial stability, I supported her job at the accounting firm, but found myself questioning the significance of her nightlife over us. My words towards her friends escalated her frustration. She questioned if I was blaming her, causing me to leave. Angry and regretting potential words, I withdrew to the couch. I considered preventing her departure, but knew it wasn't possible. Upon her return, we faced each other silently. She seemed combative, while I felt remorseful. "Laura," my voice wavering, I called out. After a pause, she might have stayed, but instead left. Once more, I called out, stronger, expressing my love and pleading for her not to hurt me or Alyssa. Looking at me, Laura's face showed no emotion as she exited through the door, shutting it firmly behind. Alyssa rushed down the stairs and into the entrance hall. watching as Laura's Lexus headlights faded away on the street. Silently, Alyssa closed the door and hastened towards the couch. I recognized that stride. The floor tiles seemed scorching hot to her. She hopped onto the couch near me, gazing at the door, hoping for Laura's return. I too looked, then Alyssa climbed onto my lap, and we hugged tightly before I led her to the kitchen to prepare sandwiches. The weekend was tense between me and Laura. She returned late in the night, drunk, making even soft noises painful after she had been cruel. For a while, Melissa and I left for the park, returning only after dinner. Laura wasn't pleased by that. Upon our return, she scolded me for leaving her behind, accusing me of being wrong. I tolerated her tirade briefly before growing tired and defending myself. I asserted that it was actually her fault for abandoning her child to go out, and suggested she should accept that Alyssa and I might enjoy ourselves without her presence. I made it clear to be either pleasant or silent. My behavior towards her took her aback, as this was not a usual tone from me, causing Laura to become quieter and more courteous towards Alyssa for the rest of the night. However, she fell ill and pushed me away later. I attempted to reconcile on Sunday, but received no response. Eventually, I resigned myself, growing angry in the process. After a while, I went to take a shower, hoping it would ease my agitation enough for sleep. This provided only minimal relief. On Monday morning, I departed before Laura woke up, which was uncommon since it forced her to prepare Alyssa, feed her, and drop her off at daycare. My wife disliked this arrangement unless she had already prepared for it, as it made her more than 30 minutes late for work. That particular day, I decided not to make it easy for Laura. Before departing in the morning, I descended to the basement, unlocked a tool locker that appeared to be ordinary, and flipped a switch activating a minuscule device that taped every call made from our home phone. Another switch was triggered, enabling a gadget to capture any cell calls within 150 feet. Though it wasn't strictly legal, it remained secret. I wouldn't use the acquired data for any legal proceedings. Our house already had cameras in almost every room following my interest in a TV show about solving murders using interior video footage. I installed them everywhere. My purpose was also to supervise babysitters and our cleaner who visited 3 times a week. Although we trusted them, it felt appropriate to monitor and verify their actions. Despite not needing a babysitter for months, we hadn't stopped checking on those nights when Laura and I went out. Was the expensive camera setup a wise investment? I navigated through the enclosed area with the towering barbed wire, leading to the office beyond, situated at the new site. The security measures were installed following our initial significant contract from the Department of Defense 3 years prior. Subsequently, the DOD returned for additional business deals. Although modest, these agreements considerably increased our earnings. Parking in a spacious slot, I switched off the engine and remained still, deliberating. I suspected Laura was concealing something, but my reasoning failed to provide substantial evidence. My heart pounded rapidly, yet I wasn't fully convinced. Her eyes betrayed guilt, but perhaps it stemmed from an unrelated matter. I yearned for that to be the case. The emblem in front of my car served as a reminder, snapping me out of my contemplation. Greeting Phil Sanders, one of my initial hires, I lifted my gaze and exchanged pleasantries before retrieving my Palm Pilot and briefcase from the back seat. 12 years ago, I started my small business as a toolmaker, but transitioned to creating move and turn mounts for home security cameras. We worked tirelessly to sell these products, eventually attracting detective firms who needed reliable spy gear. Over time, we built a strong client base that trusted us for top-quality remote control mounts. 8 years ago, we acquired a small firm specializing in high-quality color cameras with exceptional zoom capabilities. This acquisition included a compact broadcaster and receiver unit, smaller than a lady's lipstick, that could connect to any TV. Now, our company had the complete package and began selling products throughout the state, planning to expand online. We later merged 2 detective firms into one division, which we named Info and Watch Partners. Within a year, we established ourselves in 3 additional cities. Ma Industries remained successful while flying under the radar. In my workplace, I routinely sign papers handed to me by my assistant, who functions as a task supervisor without thoroughly reviewing them. This was an everyday occurrence that merely required my signature. I often joked with her, occasionally referring to her as Radar, upon which she would retort, "Colonel Potter, watch what you're doing." Maggie was the lifeblood of our office. Without her, things didn't run as smoothly, and I fretted over the day she might inform me she was departing. To keep her employed for as long as possible, I compensated her equivalent to the company vice presidents. She was privy to this confidential detail. "Maggie," I said when she delivered my morning coffee, "can you arrange a meeting with Carl Winters?" She appeared perplexed. "May I know why?" she inquired. Initially, I shook my head, then reconsidered. I felt compelled to offer her some sort of clue. Maggie had been like a mother figure to me since the early days at our previous location. "Just say that I need to be his client," I whispered slowly, avoiding eye contact. She paused. "Dear," she murmured softly, "I'm truly sorry, Mark." She sniffed and hurried away. Wondering about her assumptions, Carl handled our undercover investigations. Maggie recognized my necessity to converse with him as a client was critical. "What's going on, Mark?" Carl appeared. I motioned for him to close the oak door. Sitting there, I avoided eye contact as he took his initial sip from the large cup of tea Maggie had prepared upon arrival. "Carl," I attempted to speak, but paused to swallow. The anxiety knotting my throat and stomach muscles was unbearable, causing pain. "Carl, I feel compelled to share something with you," I confessed slowly, straining to choose my words cautiously without accusingly implying an infidelity. "Mark," he responded, looking disheartened. "I'm truly sorry to hear that," he conveyed. We both inhaled deeply. Carl set his mug on the desk corner and remained silent, focusing on his nails instead. I was at a loss for words as well. After a lengthy, uneasy silence, he stated we possess sufficient resources for thorough investigation. "I can arrange temporary staff to allow our regular employees to concentrate on this matter. Could you provide me with Laura's work schedule, cell number, login details for her computer and credit cards?" I nodded in agreement. Initially, I considered employing external help rather than using our own people for this task. However, I understood that Carl desired the most capable individuals. Sighing, I leaned over my desk to retrieve my briefcase. I had spent much of Sunday compiling account numbers and other details from documents belonging to Laura and myself, information I knew he would need. I had arranged for myself to be a paying client of Information and Surveillance Associates, with the costs coming from my personal bank account. It was a minor expense, but it would appease the accountants. We discussed discreetly monitoring my wife to determine her whereabouts, associates, and activities. I felt foolish for doing so, which seemed senseless. Over the weekend, I'd come to realize my growing emotional detachment from Laura's affection. It was urgent that I addressed this issue, as I hadn't found anything harmful in her actions she wouldn't have known about mine. However, I had some questions that needed answering. I was considering suggesting we seek help from a marriage counselor to address any issues she might be facing. By noon, I wanted clarity on whether she was involved in unsuitable activities for a married woman. Time was of the essence. Individuals associated with Carl's group had accessed Laura's Lexus, which was parked at her office downtown. My name was also listed on the title, making the task less complicated as I handed over my key. They placed the purchase sound-activated microphone under the driver's seat. Within a meter radius, it could detect signals from the small transmitter. Sensitive enough to pick up a whisper, even within a soundproof car like a well, the microphone worked independently. A GPS transmitter was hidden in the trunk, immediately transmitting the vehicle's location with pinpoint accuracy, nearly at the exact spot. The investigation was being led by 7 of Carl's most proficient staff members, using 5 vehicles assigned for the task. To prevent rental cars and vans from malfunctioning if needed, each one underwent thorough inspection by our in-house mechanics. A highly qualified freelance woman, not the first, applied for a role at Laura's accounting firm, set to start the following week. Carl advised me to stay calm and let him manage the situation himself. Since there were established procedures in place to handle similar matters, it was wise not to intervene immediately. This only amplified my gloom. What if Laura was involved with another man? Given its mundane nature, such situations had standard protocols. Furthermore, Carl mentioned that I had a choice. They might attempt to prevent an impending liaison if they were made aware of it. If necessary, or if postponing actions for amassing numerous photos and videos for a divorce case was required, I ceased any work they might discover pertained to such an assignment. The idea didn't require contemplation at all as I yearned for my wife's return. Upon nodding, he asked me to strive to not interfere with Laura's schedule. He would signal when a decision was needed. However, I disclosed that a turning point had occurred and it would soon pass. That night, I phoned him from the basement. Upon listening to mobile phone taps, we discovered that the materials gathered at that time were not legal. Despite this, we didn't expect to use them in court. On the second ring, Carl answered the call. I wondered aloud about who Carl was. He quickly noticed the emotion thick in my voice. "Wow," he said. "What's going on?" It was evident he was worried about something. To compose myself, I took a deep breath and held it for a while. "You remember the landline and cell phone taps I had to set up when we built the house, don't you?" I asked. "Yes, that's right. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it to that location today to install the remote surveillance equipment." "That's true, Carl. Do you think there are only 26 hours in a day? Regardless, Carl, please try not to worry about it." At around 7 p.m., I have a recording of Laura speaking with a man named Brian. I exhaled deeply and continued my work. I assume you'll be able to listen to it tomorrow. Brian alluded to Laura's betrayer as the son of a witch, declaring he would again ravage Laura's mind. Despite my urge to weep, I held back the tears from welling in my eyes. A knot formed at the pit of my stomach, a sensation I couldn't halt. It felt like my body was carved from wood, wrapped in cotton layers that dulled every feeling. It hurt to breathe. I struggled to draw in air. Upon learning Laura was engaging in sexual acts with another man, I was bewildered. She stepped outside the marriage for sex, leaving me at a loss for words to justify her actions. I couldn't fathom why she would betray both me and our child in such a way. Yet, I tried to force down the lump rising in my throat. To you, Carl, I expressed that when I regain composure, we shall discuss this matter further. Tomorrow morning, I will phone Pete and set in motion the divorce process for Laura. At present, it seems crucial that we gather as much evidence as feasible. Pete Robinson, a prominent lawyer, served as both the retainer for Industries and my personal attorney. His name was Peter Robinson. I concur with your assessment, Mark, and it appears there's not much more we can do. Carl spoke his remarks slowly and hesitantly. He said, "I am just so sorry." He added that his empathy helped a bit. My reply was, "Yeah, I know, Carl," as I raised the tone of my voice. "Thank you, partner, but the praise is due to Laura. This isn't anyone else's fault. However, I have a young daughter who will be devastated. We are both victims in this situation. Regarding Laura's behavior, I'm utterly puzzled. I focused my attention on the current matter. It wasn't my plan to portray the part of the long-suffering spouse any longer beyond this moment of solitude and sorrow. I thought it best to inform you that we are shifting directions, effective immediately. I told him I would be at the office tomorrow morning. Is that acceptable for you?" "Of course, it is, Mark." He agreed. "Tonight, let's unwind, all right? Avoid any actions that might haunt you later, boss." "Indeed," he advised. When he cautioned me against taking actions potentially harmful to my wife, I realized he was serious. "Yes, Carl, I am well." I disclosed that I had listened to the intercept recording 3 hours prior, and I have moved past that point. I took a brief pause. "I'm going to tell you, Carl, that I won't be having any sexual relations with her tonight or in the future. I'll need to concoct an excuse. However, I won't sleep with a woman who betrays me, whether physically or metaphorically. There are actions I can take and others I can't. Regardless of how it might make the investigation more complicated, I just can't do it." The last words I spoke were said with a hint of emotion in my voice. But Carl didn't respond to it. He replied in a comforting tone, "That's all right. Those involved in such activities often believe they are more intelligent than others, Mark, even though it might take longer. They may think they can hide their infidelity from both their partners and the world, but they're oblivious to the fact that their behavior is predictable and relatively easy to track. I haven't uttered any statements. Keep going, boss. You've come this far. Carl suggested everything will work out in the end, no matter how it unfolds. Can you hear me? You'll come out of this stronger than when you entered. Is that all right with you? From any angle." I said, "Yes, I will make it so." However, I didn't fully trust it. All I could foresee was a dark abyss in the future full of shame and pain for both my daughter and me. This would cause her immense emotional turmoil, and I hadn't even considered it yet. Fine, Mark, call if you need help. 2. No declarations from me. Keep pushing, boss. You've advanced this far. Carl suggested that everything will end up fine, regardless of how it transpires. Can you hear me? After this experience, you'll be stronger than ever. Is that okay with you? From whatever perspective. I said yes, I will ensure it, but I didn't have faith in it. Whenever I looked into the future, all I could perceive was a black hole filled with embarrassment and suffering for both my daughter and me. This would create immense emotional distress for her, and I hadn't even contemplated it yet. Okay, Mark, call if you need assistance. 3. No statements from me. Keep going, boss. You've come this far. Carl thinks everything will turn out fine, no matter how it happens. Can you hear me? After this event, you'll be stronger than before. Is that all right with you? Whatever the angle. I said, yes, I'll make it happen. However, I didn't trust it fully. Whenever I looked into the future, all I could see was a dark void filled with embarrassment and suffering for both my daughter and me. This would create emotional distress for her, and I hadn't even contemplated it yet. Okay, Mark, call if you need help. To document any additional conversations between my wife and her suspected deceiver, I re-enabled the surveillance device. That evening, I stayed in a guest room down the hall and informed Laura that I had a dry throat and congestion which might lead to loud snoring. This was quickly accepted by her. I also mentioned that I'd be closer to Anne if needed during the night. Moreover, our child's repeated bedwetting incidents the preceding week were new information for Laura. She merely shrugged and continued reading her magazine. Although I observed my daughter's emotional distress, it appeared to have no effect on Laura. Later, a report from Carl reached me, suggesting that Brian C.R. was Laura's afternoon lover. At Laura's workplace, there was a colleague who was one of her former spouses, working in accounting. Apart from Laura, he was among 3 division supervisors. He had a 7-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. Prior to this, he was married to Pamela. She worked as a part-time insurance agent in an office situated on the opposite side of town. At 38 years old, I was slightly older than Brian, though he was still shorter. In my teenage years, I competed as an amateur boxer under the Golden Gloves organization. Simultaneously, I started weight training to boost my upper body strength and leg endurance. Though I gave up boxing when I entered college, I continued to lift weights regularly. From the single photo found thus far, it appeared that Mr. Collier might be more of a runner, if he engaged in sports at all. Unbeknownst to me about women's preferences for attractiveness, I intuited that he would be appealing to the average woman, yet not exceptionally so overall. To be honest, I wasn't greatly captivated, and I was uncertain. It was due to him that Laura seemed inclined to breach our wedding vows flagrantly, choosing to meet for extramarital sexual encounters with this man. Carl manipulated a connection he had with the phone company to acquire a comprehensive 2-year record of Laura's call history, and some of his associates quickly reviewed them. Initially, the calls between the two were few and far between, as per the initial analysis. However, over time, they began to occur weekly about 6 months ago, and later on a daily basis. Now, they happen multiple times a day, mostly during early morning or late night hours. Carl noticed the hour of your arrival at work and informed you that a conversation between us was ongoing. Usually, whenever I departed for work in the morning, evening calls originating from Laura were almost always instigated, and they occurred during times when she could confirm availability. It's unlikely that I would have heard it, but it might have been while I was working out with my child in the basement. The timing of these sessions lined up almost perfectly. Do you possess any data or insights regarding events around the time when phone call frequency began to escalate? Carl asked about this. In terms of his conduct, he was strictly professional, a trait I appreciated as it facilitated the handling of the matter more smoothly. When Carl observed me starting to unwind slightly, he mimicked my action from across the desk. I leaned back in my chair, contemplating, and even elevated my feet onto the corner of my desk near the center. Suddenly or gradually, it struck me that a couple of weeks earlier, she had attended a training conference in Chicago, representing a company her firm was auditing financially. I admitted with unease that this seminar was provided by them. As I continued to reflect, more details surfaced. Earlier, as I paused, a fragment of memory took shape in my mind. During that time, I accompanied Laura to the airport. A faint voice echoed. Another person was present, getting on the same flight. I can recall it vividly, like the sound of a trumpet. "All right," Carl said confidently. "Although my family will pursue finding another nexus, I'm convinced that the seminar was the catalyst for this catastrophe. Various clues suggest as much." I gave a subtle nod. As a man, I don't believe in coincidences. It was Carl who checked his notepad. "For now, boss." As he said, we received an email from the credit card issuers containing a digital record of the past year's activities, which is helpful since you and Laura share accounts on each one. I'm reminded of that. Later today, we will examine your bank records to determine if there's anything relevant there. I'll keep you informed about our findings. All right. The volume of evidence we've gathered thus far, in terms of its extent and detail, is impressive. 2 days into the case, you've managed to gather extensive information without my consent. I questioned your methods. I hesitated to confront banks and service providers about their ease in disclosing private data. Carl smirked, asking for my thoughts. I raised my eyebrows quizzically. He chuckled. "If Maggie sets a stack of documents before you, boss, you're unaware of what you're signing." A smile was forced, keeping it from slipping. "In my youth, I used to express trust in Maggie more than my wife. Now she holds the top spot." "Fine, fine." As I surrendered with a gesture, I agreed to fight the malicious individuals and women. By Thursday, I informed him of this. Carl's group accumulated a large amount of data regarding my wife and her new sexual partner, Brian. Multiple detectives have been sent to Chicago, where several individuals at the seminar organizing firm recalled Laura and Brian being very close. Initially unaware they had different last names, one hotel desk clerk, who witnessed many of their activities, thought they were married. 3 or 4 more hotel guests, who stayed in the same hotel as Laura and Brian, recognized them as regular lounge patrons, often observing them drinking large quantities of alcoholic beverages. Frequently observed leaving for the elevator to one of the rooms, management at the lounge asked them to curtail their risky behavior during the early morning hours on 2 separate occasions. 2 representatives from Carl mentioned they were discussing with the hotel administration regarding the retrieval of old security footage, implying a monetary exchange, which Carl clarified to me, smirking. This transaction was what he referred to. I subtly acknowledged his revelation. Earlier than expected, Carl's freelance agent had been summoned to Laura's office. Immediately, it was being reported that Brian and Laura were romantically involved in the office. This was a crucial piece of information. It seemed their mutual employer had knowledge of this situation as well, and Carl had repeatedly warned them to keep their affair under wraps within the workplace. From the given data, it's clear that Laura had suffered a reduction in her merit increase due to a performance review based on her conduct. I've saved this detail in my memory. My lawyer might find relevant a company that seemingly neglected to address blatant breaches of morality clauses mentioned in their employees' contracts. As a payroll department worker, I'd already accessed Laura and Mr. Kohler's salary and attendance records, along with related information. Initially, it seemed like they were arranging weekly meetings, usually on weekday afternoons. Bank statements provided by our bank suggested that Brian SR may also be inactive, as Laura frequently covered hotel expenses for an out-of-town economy hotel. In my viewpoint, it was unmistakably evident that this was an inexpensive and distasteful event. A reputable hotel in the city center refused to host their gathering. The group of girlfriends that Laura mentioned she would meet when she went out at night primarily consisted of recently divorced or unmarried women seeking men, with the exception of a woman named Kathy. Apart from Kathy, all others had taken an oath sworn by Laura to maintain secrecy about the matter. We are disclosing a substantial amount of data to Carl's investigators in a hurried manner. Essentially, they could easily provide dates, locations, and even approximate times for when Laura and Brian would meet. A mere $100 was required, seemingly incidentally. However, lately, even this false narrative has been dismissed. In the last 2 months, most of the women have not encountered Laura. I am Kathy. A quick call reached Laura, informing her about someone's inquiry into her association with certain groups. She assured she hadn't revealed any details regarding the matter. It was only fair, she thought, to suspect me given our circumstances, as I am a close friend of hers. However, it seemed absurd, vindictive, and unfair for me to investigate Laura. As it turned out, my suspicion proved correct. Kathy, experienced in such matters, yet still lacking comprehensive knowledge, had a checkered past. Her marital history showed 2 divorces, one due to her husband's infidelity with his secretary, the second because she was found with a plumber by her new husband. Throughout her life, Kathy had been involved romantically with several men. In 2 separate instances, she was recognized as a party in divorce lawsuits, where her actions involved deliberately courting the husbands. Despite not working in the same building, this woman found herself unintentionally part of the same circle as my wife. At best, it seemed like Kathy tacitly endorsed the affair due to her ability to do so. Furthermore, we discovered that Carl had cloned Laura's phone, which explained why $100 bribes were still being kept by other women. Kathy had led Laura to believe they would betray her, and the other women responded to Laura's panicked calls with promises of the same. However, the idea of betrayal never crossed Laura's mind. In truth, Laura was only conscious of someone inquiring about her, yet her companions conspired to maintain her secret. Once more, I found myself astonished by the abundance and caliber of data generated by Carl's operation within a brief span, as Laura pondered. It's evident that Brian and Laura were the least experienced among them, with Carl embodying professionalism in its purest form. Success seemed elusive for Brian and Laura. The subsequent days of that week, along with the following 2, were tranquil at our home. As per Carl's representatives, the ladies visited a couple of clubs and danced with various people who asked, with the exception that Laura had canceled almost all her nightlife plans, except for Friday. Following this, everyone returned to their homes. As a young man, Brian lived at home with his wife and children. A report suggested that his wife wasn't entirely pleased with his sudden change in behavior, which she voiced concerns about openly. I came across this information while reading a story. I was surprised to find that the investigators' questioning of the girls in the small group had such a minimal impact. However, Laura and Brian seemed arrogant towards me. Despite this, they have managed to persevere for a considerable period. Within 3 weeks after the detectives contacted them, the mobile phone intercepts on Friday nights started to become more frequent and explicit. Both unfaithful spouses assumed all issues were settled and believed I too had concluded there was no infidelity happening during that time. Our spare room was mostly mine at this point. Attempting to cheek kiss Laura, I struggled to stand. Upon arriving home in the evening, I understood it was impossible to engage in sexual activity with her. She subtly suggested passion throughout our talk, but I chose to disregard it. I read all books from Alyssa's small library, mastered a deep, dry cough, and bought more books for shared reading. It was clear to Laura why we slept apart. However, she never advised me to stay away from the infant while I coughed so intensely. However, Carl and his group noticed an escalation in the number of late-night phone conversations between Laura and Brian. The rendezvous between Laura and Brian was set for their usual budget motel on the 3rd day of the week. Due to Carl's efforts, Everyone was anxiously waiting to uncover details about the alleged affair, and my lawyer, Pete, had me well prepared and ready to intervene. I managed to hire Mandy, a local 16-year-old girl, to babysit Alyssa. That very night, "It's Laura, please stay home tonight," I implored. As she was exiting the house, I stood in the living room, watching her leave. "I begged you, Laura, not to go. I wasn't acting rashly. It was crucial for me that she didn't meet that man outside and get hurt by him. It's Mark." In her realization that she couldn't leave without trying to convince me, Laura grew angry. Her facial expression altered drastically. "There is absolutely nothing happening," Mark said firmly. "All he planned was going out for a drink and perhaps some dancing." That was all she said, her face as innocent as melted butter in his mouth. Upon her return, she hugged him warmly while looking into his eyes earnestly, trying to persuade him about something he was certain she intended to do. In an impulsive moment, Mark countered Laura by saying, "I understand that you're meeting someone tonight, but there is no way he could mean as much to you as Alyssa and I do." He pleaded, "Sweetie, please stay here." After taking a step back, Laura released him. Suddenly, she showed signs of suspicion, curious about what he knew. "I require clarification on what you're discussing. Are you angry?" She inquired about it. I needed to pass it on to her. Over the years, she has become a gifted actress. I merely demanded that she do so. "I am aware that you are involved with another person. You are not only causing this distress for me, but also for Alyssa. None of us are being treated fairly by this." I expressed my dissent. She relaxed slightly. Apparently, her thinking was that without a specific name, all I had were suspicions about the individual in question. In a firm tone, she declared, "I am not cheating on you. I'm growing tired of these accusations, and it's time we put an end to them." She issued a warning. "If you continue this, shame on you. Moreover, I might hire an unknown man to meet my demands so that I can demonstrate them to you." I had to look away. If she had noticed the sudden fury in my gaze, I would have ruined everything. "It's Laura. As previously mentioned, Lee is damaged." The task was not challenging. Due to the anger coursing through me, it was hard for me to express myself. "Not another word," she shouted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never done so, and at that moment I wasn't either. And I swear I will never betray you with any other man. Does that satisfy your demands?" She turned around, her light jacket wrapped around her shoulders, heading towards the room entrance, revealing she wasn't wearing a bra underneath and had no panty lines showing in her mini skirt. "Teresa," I said more calmly, "there will be no more marriage between us if you ever cheat on me. You are aware of that, aren't you? The harmful effects of infidelity and its impact on couples have been topics of conversation before. When Georgia and Sam ended their relationship a year ago." Pause a moment to consider this situation. There was no motion on the doorknob from Laura's hand. As I mentioned earlier, her voice, though supposedly controlled, carried an undertone of superiority. "To set the record straight, I want you to know that I have no intention of involving myself with any man. However, it will never be between you and me." In a sharp tone, she declared, "I'm running late now and must leave." She didn't even glance back at me before opening the door and leaving. Exactly 20 minutes later, I found myself in a room with Carl and three of his closest companions, the same room where Brian and Laura would shortly find themselves apprehensive due to my forthcoming protest this evening. Additionally, there has been suspicious questioning from Laura's friends in recent weeks. My presence was motivated by concern over how they might respond to my protest. It seemed as though Brian and Laura were aimlessly driving, looking for any signs of pursuit. GPS devices revealed no one trailed them after making the reservation at the motel, a fact recognized by Carl minutes afterwards. This was because the desk clerk received a few $100s to call when the booking was made, as we knew their destination. There was no reason to follow them, although it might have occurred. If only we'd known their final destination, we could have saved ourselves the trouble. Without the GPS devices installed in both vehicles, Carl would have required multiple cars to keep pace with Laura and her companion as they drove on parallel roads. Since I had been there for a short while, Neither of them would have ever noticed their pursuers. Laura and Brian arrived at the motel simultaneously in their cars and parked in front of room 113. The motel's entrance was accessible from outside and led to all the rooms, so the love-struck couple merely needed to step out of their cars and walk a short distance to reach it. However, they missed noticing the hidden vent on the opposite street, unbeknownst to them. A high-end digital camera captured every move they made without their knowledge. Laura and Brian indulged in deep kisses, touched each other intimately, and wrapped arms around one another passionately. Carl watched closely from afar, knowing that my plan was to burst into the room and disrupt the scene. He whispered to me, "Mark, this situation will escalate significantly. Can you stand it?" After confirming his seat on a double bed, I felt my mouth go dry as I wondered if there was anything to drink available. I asked about something. He appeared bewildered and disinterestedly shook his head. No. Simultaneously, he proffered me a small yellow Valium tablet and suggested, "I think you should take this Valium." He said it gently. "It will ease your anxiety." I complied and later retrieved a beverage from the cooler he had brought along. Carl managed to camouflage a top-tier digital camera within the room, hiding it behind the vent of the air conditioning unit. It offered a full range of motion in an arc spanning 160 degrees horizontally and 85 degrees vertically. Additionally, it operated in full color throughout its lifespan. Furthermore, it boasted a zoom capability of 25 times, allowing it to pinpoint individual hairs in the nostrils of both individuals present. However, Carl did not envision such specificity being necessary under any circumstances. Immediately upon entering the building, events unfolded swiftly. As I had suspected, Laura was bare underneath and quickly discarded her clothes. Once they had both fallen onto the bed, Brian followed shortly after. After we extinguished all the lights in our room, two of Carl's men ventured outside at night. Besides a camera and an air conditioning duct, Carl also brought fiber optic snake cameras. One was hidden beneath the door to Laura's room while the other perched on top. With dimensions smaller than 4 inches in diameter and just a few inches long, these cameras were compact. Their transmitters and antennas remained outdoors, easily slipping through the gaps between the door and its frame, at the chosen camera locations as dictated by the men's preference. Under the cloak of night, they affixed transmitters to the outer wall. To make them undetectable from a few feet away, they used dark-colored spy devices. Prior to re-entering, the group unscrewed the solitary outdoor lamp, providing sufficient light for the area. Following the correct connection of receivers to monitors and recording equipment, we resumed our preparations for the event. It was believed that if one camera missed something, the other two would certainly record it. In reality, there was little spectacle involved. Without a hint of foreplay, politeness, or emotion, nothing was present. After slipping on a yellow condom, Brian positioned himself atop my 304 as my wife lay in missionary position. He began thrusting vigorously. For a brief moment, I glanced at her face. The lines on her forehead puzzled me whether they were signs of distress or pleasure. I couldn't tell. After watching for a minute or two, I asserted that SBE wasn't larger than myself. However, I had been mistaken. He was barely comparable to my size. I objected. Incredibly, she was correct. When we first married, Laura had been keen on measuring me, and by then she had used a ruler on multiple occasions. It was through her friends that Laura learned my size fell within the higher end of the average range. During our lovemaking, she called out to me, urging me to thrust harder with my impressive girth. Lately, we hadn't accomplished much. I knew why, but I wasn't actively involved. It was evident that Brian wasn't particularly gifted, and he had to put in a lot of work to stimulate Laura. Moreover, the man possessed technological prowess reminiscent of a pig rooting around in a barnyard. I couldn't comprehend what Laura saw in this fellow. Later, I managed to regain some self-respect. To my delight, I spotted Sherry, one of Carl's associates, casting furtive glances at my direction. After a while, she looked away from the television screens and shook her head, displaying a smile. It seemed to me that there was a trace of doubt in her eyes. We both avoided eye contact. Since she worked for me, I decided not to create trouble in my own domain. Yet, she was endearing, as they say. It might not be permanent, her staying by my side. A vacant bed awaited soon, friend. Several days later, I left. At that moment, there were no further developments. The dispute between Brian and Laura persisted for some time. Let's take a breather, then try again. As for Laura, what was it about Yahoo that attracted her? Furthermore, why did she engage in sexual activity with him after being married for 6 years? A week elapsed before the two affair partners finally connected, and by then they were both feeling quite exasperated due to a world keeping them apart. It seemed their schedules were clashing unusually, and they were uncertain about how to handle the situation temporarily. Eventually, Kathy suggested an idea to Laura, a trip to Las Vegas the following weekend, with Ag accompanying her. The investigative group had ample information on Kathy. They had amassed a mountain of details about Kathy. I'm Kathy myself. On the surface, she appeared to be a woman with a cruel demeanor. During a phone conversation, her friends deduced her resentment and estrangement from her family due to past infidelity. Carl's team was not monitoring either of them. As per her earlier proposition, Kathy elaborated further. In a Calon radio contest, Kathy had won an excessive number of free tickets to Las Vegas and invited Laura to join her on this journey. She wanted Laura to inform me about it. After listening to the call's recording, it was clear to everyone that Kathy was implying that only she and Laura should embark on a trip to Sin City. In simpler terms, the objective was to engage in frequent sexual activities. Laura learned that her friend had bought 20 condoms, planning to use them all. However, she threw a spanner in the works by promptly inviting Brian, whom she urged to attend. Laura was quickly charmed, but she managed this by contacting Brian. Upon hearing about it later in a call, Kathy's voice suggested displeasure over Brian joining them, yet she didn't protest. As I found out, Brian was supposed to cover his own expenses. His stingy demeanor in the final phone conversation before departure struck me as frugal. He seemed ungrateful for the situation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was being cheap. He suggested Laura should cover his travel costs so he could take advantage of her generosity. Amazingly, it was Pete on the line. My lawyer told me he intended to include Kathy on the list of individuals to be served subpoenas. Aware that both Laura and Brian were married, Kathy had been cognizant of this fact for a prolonged period. Throughout the entire perplexing situation, she acted as an intermediary. Pete was doubtful that she possessed any funds that could be seized, even if the case went before civil courts. He believed it would not succeed. Instead, his aim was to instill fear in her. Once he had completed dealing with her, he asserted that she would never again think of aiding in the dissolution of another couple's marriage. We discussed whether we should resolve the matter using merely the motel tape or wait for the planned trip to Vegas. Pete contemplated terminating deceit, dishonesty, and his imminent divorce from Laura. He decided to give them more chances to incriminate themselves. As he put it, their out-of-state trip, laden with lies and falsehoods, would be a pivotal moment in their lives. Such an event would carry significant weight if Laura violated her marital vows egregiously. Lawyers have a unique way of expressing things. What he truly sought was to catch her overstepping boundaries, either through words or actions, and this wish came to fruition. Meanwhile, detectives were also present at the casino hotel, where Kathy, Brian, and Laura were staying. In one tower, they were stationed, while Carl and 5 of his associates were holed up in a room in another tower. From this specific room, they could directly observe the meeting room below. We shelled out $500 to get a room on this side of the building, a room that was easily visible from where Carl stood. It's said by Carlos agents that those 5 bills disappeared from the counter at an unprecedented speed for the human eye. It will take just a few seconds to finalize the reservation. The clerk only needed a computer console for this task. He likely considered it the most effortless income he had ever made, being so close, just a few hundred feet away. The location of Laura was not hidden. She occupied the space there. 3 cameras set up by Carl were recording the happenings in the room on the other side of the road. He informed me that there was a probable chance they'd capture something. Based on his observations, people in tall buildings felt an inherent sense of invisibility due to their height and perceived distance from other structures. This sensation was consistent in scenarios he had managed. He mentioned that Carl's boys possessed laser technology capable of detecting window vibrations and sounds made by individuals, even if the blinds were closed. He guaranteed this assertion under the condition they closed the shades. We would only be able to record their voices, as there would be no video involved. However, should a video exist, it would be of sufficient quality to identify speakers in court. During the Cold War, it was developed and used by intelligence agencies from both the West and Russia for spying purposes, as stated by Karl of the Russian Federation. The phone conversation, too, was meant to be recorded. I decided to call Laura one last time, hoping to convince her to end her infidelity and return to me. However, my lawyer saw it merely as a scripted production, yet I held on to hope that it could work. As I moved, hot flushes and cold chills raced through me in a frenzied manner. My mind was a whirlwind of contrasting emotions, racing around like the chasing cold and heat. I was unsure of what I was feeling, only knowing that I was suffering. Despite fasting all day, I felt nauseous. Left at home by Carl and his group, I watched the proceedings through cameras. They employed a private eye to monitor them closely. Inside the plane, a steward was dispensing small bottles of blue liquid. The wind had already scattered 3 sheets of it. As I spoke into the phone's webcam, I addressed Laura. Glancing over, I saw Laura on the bed with her knees and elbows on the floor, while Brian stood behind her. To reach the phone on the nightstand, she had to contort her body. Kathy, positioned behind Brian, seemed pleased as she spoke into her phone, hurling angry words. Upon hearing my voice, she distanced herself from Brian and Kathy and moved away from them. "Teresa, my dear, refrain from any intimate acts with me," I repeated. "That's the other man." It felt like I had forgotten to mention his name. I needed to see him. It wasn't that I was expected to know his name just yet. I couldn't let Laura know about her yet. Each action was being carefully monitored. "Return to me, my love. We pleaded with you, please. We can find a way out." I tried to sound as reassuring as possible. This is the term my lawyer suggested for the document. It was meant to show Laura's complete unfaithfulness and apathy. "Keep Alyssa in your thoughts, Laura. Consider how she might feel if our marriage suffers." It's amazing how long a person can hold on to hope, even as they watch something beautiful disintegrate before their eyes. I cared deeply for Laura. Hopes of encountering something that would rekindle my optimism remained unfulfilled, as there was no hope in sight. I may be in love with her, but I couldn't help it. The feeling had taken hold without my consent. Yet, I disliked her intensely at this moment. Just then, she admitted to not hating it. "Foolish of you." Inside the phone, Laura let out a scream. "I've warned you about this before, you fool. I am not engaging in any sexual activities, and I'm tired of your meddling in my affairs." In response to the deception, all I could manage was a head shake. How could she say that? She was right beside me, nude, with the man she had been with, and who she would be with again after I hung up. It was astonishing how duplicitous she was. For a while, she remained silent on the screen, moving closer to her friends who were watching her. "However, allow me to divulge this," she eventually whispered, seeming as if sharing a secret. "Maybe I'll pick a stranger off the street tonight and bring him to our room, darling. Isn't that an idea, my love? Would it please you if I did this to prove you right once? How does that sound to you, sweetheart?" Her voice, filled with venom, left me stunned. This was the same woman who, a year ago, needed to be consoled all night after her beloved cat passed away. I had always thought of Laura as a warm, nurturing presence in our bed, someone I could confide in and rely on when our child was asleep. But now, Laura, I'm at a loss for words. I don't understand why you would risk destroying our lives like this. Consider what this will do to Alyssa, for goodness sake. Laura interrupted me with a deafening shout. "Go to hell and take her with you," she bellowed. She was so enraged that her words were barely comprehensible. All I could understand was her mouth moving on the screen. "You fool, we will resolve this when I return, and I hope I don't leave you for good. Understood?" She continued to shout incomprehensible phrases, despite her mouth being clearly visible. Pressing the power off button, she flung the phone onto the bed, which it narrowly missed, landing instead between the bed and the wall. With a stumble, she directed Brian to prepare again. On Sunday morning, Carl and his group dismantled all the equipment, packed it away, and shipped it back. Exhausted, they boarded a plane and dozed off for the entire journey home. We amassed substantial evidence, such as videos, photographs, phone conversations, and financial records, that overloaded my attorney. By Monday noon, he initiated the divorce proceedings. He had 6 months to scrutinize all the evidence before the state would merely acknowledge and grant my divorce. Immediately, we presented a transparent video of my wife with another man, using foul language about me and our daughter, captured through an open window. What we observed was also documented as evidence. Videos from our home security system depicting my spouse disregarding our daughter, Alice, were presented to a judge. Instances like when she left and Alice pursued her, moments of unjustified anger towards Alice, and an incident where she instructed Alice to prepare breakfast because she was occupied. These incidents were brought to light before the judge by early Monday. Subsequently, the judge granted temporary full custody to me, delaying a family court judge's review of the situation. Additionally, restrictions were placed on my spouse's access to Alice, pending a comprehensive investigation. Furthermore, other requests were granted without complications. The benefits of wealth and influence expedited processes. My lawyer was becoming wealthier as a result. Mondays at the accounting firm were challenging due to excessive alcohol consumption. Some employees began drinking on Friday evenings and continued till Sunday nights. The majority of colleagues either idled at their desks or conversed near the coffee station, waiting for the drinkers to sober up. As the towering gent in gray attire entered from the corridor post-lunch hour, some females cast furtive glances, yet he showed no indication of noticing. He continuously scrutinized a picture clutched in his hand and then inspected every female's visage. It didn't take long for him to locate the woman he sought. With the trio engaged in conversation, he positioned himself directly before her. She was engrossed in quiet dialogue with a tall, sharp-featured man in his 40s, accompanied by a shorter, slender man who kept close proximity. She appeared tense and visibly displeased. Her eyes reflected deep concern. She endeavored to maintain distance from him, but listened attentively to her superior's discourse. Upon being addressed as Laura Archer by the tall man in a resonant tone, she acknowledged him with a nod. She was far from all right that day. Something weighed heavily on her, evident in her expression. Her gaze shifted as the man extracted a substantial envelope from his coat. "Ma'am," he declared audibly, drawing attention to himself and everyone around. He set aside his briefcase and retrieved delicate, translucent legal documents backed by a thicker, baby blue sheet. Addressing a stunned Laura, he declared these were copies of the divorce petition submitted earlier that day. "Mr. Mark Archer seeks to dissolve the marriage promptly." He provided another stack of papers. "These, ma'am, constitute a restraining order prohibiting you from approaching the residence you and Mr. Archer inhabited within a 1,000 feet radius." Another set of papers were a court order that forbids any contact with Mr. Archer's daughter, Ali Sorio Archer, no calls, emails, letters, or attempts to communicate in any way. "Understood, madam." She merely nodded, speechless, her shock evident. A gathering audience formed around Mr. Archer. 2 hours prior, the joint credit cards were canceled, and the bank accounts shared by you two were frozen. "You'll receive half of the funds from those accounts." He displayed the check contemptuously, then combined it with other documents and handed them to Laura Archer. "Mr. Archer declared he was currently packing all your belongings. They would be transferred into a truck. Soon, your possessions would be in storage, accessible whenever you desired by contacting Mr. Archer's lawyer using the number on this card. You are no longer permitted to return to the shared house. New locks and security codes have been installed." The large man stared at Laura, now weeping without any compassion. He noticed someone attempting to slip away silently. "Mr. SR, wait," he called. He gave Brian Cirque another envelope, striking his hand. "This was good news," he said. You are currently involved in the Archer's divorce proceedings, and Mr. Archer has filed a lawsuit against you as of today. Furthermore, he accused you of maliciously disrupting the marriage between Mark Archer and Laura Archer, and that you have been having an illicit affair with a former Mrs. Archer. The relationship was described as slimy, ugly, and sordid. Brian appeared on the verge of fainting and clung to a desk to avoid collapsing. My attorney didn't believe that this towering figure failed to notice Laura's supervisor. He approached him to deliver a legal document. It was a claim filed that day, demanding Mark Archer be reimbursed due to the company breaching its own policies regarding appropriate conduct by superiors. A senior executive who had been aware of the problems from the start received the same document in the upscale office area, watching discreetly. I felt nothing. I was frozen to the core. My heart transformed into a frozen realm. I stood still near the doors where the legal representative entered. I had given him additional money to deliver my wife the check and some other items. It wasn't part of his official duties. I saw how Laura acknowledged her massive mistake when she fell to the floor. I walked out through the grand doors. I observed as my soon-to-be ex-wife entered the luxurious conference room. I was seated at the front of the long table close to the windows. Under the glare of the sun, she needed to squint to recognize me. Seated in a large executive chair, I attempted to project nonchalance, despite my internal turmoil. However, I managed to conceal it effectively, having honed this skill over time. Laura expressed her anxiety as she said, "I wanted to see you before the lawyers got here." She brought a chair closer and sat down. Approximately 4 months had passed since she lost her job and returned to live with her brother. Her brown hair was growing back out again, having previously cut it short for her role in finance, believing it made her appear more sharp and professional. She looked gaunt and moved awkwardly. She seemed to be struggling with lack of food and sleep. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes. Despite feeling compassion for her predicament, I maintained a stoic facade. My work persona, characterized by sternness, remained in place. "With you here now," I addressed her gently. She nodded without looking at me, then turned to face me. "Mark," she whispered, "I want to express my deep regret for what I did to you and our daughter." I remained silent. I recognize it won't heal the pain inflicted, but it's the best I can offer at this moment. "I'm hurting too, Mark," she said gently. "I cannot fathom why I acted as I did, and it's driving me insane." For a while, she fell silent, so I spoke up. "I'm hurting too," I told her straightforwardly. "You have no idea what pain is, Laura, until you must explain to a 3-year-old that their mother may not return. 4 months have passed since then, and she still cries at night. Only recently can I bring a faint smile to her face." Watching Laura cry more in her seat, I stopped. She cries because anyone trying to stop her from reaching me makes her upset, and if I leave her alone for too long, she fears I won't return. Can you understand how frightening that is for such a young child, Laura? I found myself growing tense in my chair as Laura sobbed heavily. In the workplace, she's now at a new daycare for convenience. After repeated instances of her panicking upon losing sight of me, I established it. Her distress is palpable when she can't locate me. Observing Laura weep a little longer, I attempted to feign cheerfulness. The office mothers are thriving, and the cost has almost been recouped. She remained unresponsive. I inquired gently as to why, prompting her with, "Why did you do it, Laura? My love for you was immeasurable, yet you caused me immense pain. A void exists within me now, Laura, one that can't begin to be filled until I comprehend the reasoning." She only shook her head and let tears flow freely. Without makeup, she wore a somber expression. Perhaps she anticipated her emotional outburst. Despite age, she looked more beautiful than during our wedding at 30 years old. Watching her cry pained me deeply, almost as much as I felt today. The grief resurfaced from the loss of my younger brother in a car accident during my teenage years. Today, I was more tormented than ever before, uncertain how to restore tranquility. "The pain may linger forever," I contemplated. Later, she confessed, "I don't know why. Maybe I'm mad." She was silent after that. "I can't undo my actions," I acknowledged. "Mark," she murmured softly, I don't merit your forgiveness, and I won't plead for it. I harmed the only man I deeply cherish, a pain I must bear for eternity. I'm at a loss of what to do. I wish I didn't exist when I recall what I did to our daughter, when I remember myself shouting at you to take her with you that night." She paused, tears still streaming down. As I tried to retrieve the DVD player in the corner, my hand almost grasped the remote control. Yet, I failed to refer to the bookmark list on the disc. I knew which scene contained a woman, intoxicated and bare, brutally abusing her own child. I didn't activate it as it seemed unnecessary. It seemed she was already aware of its content. Later, her sobbing subsided. I assumed she couldn't cry anymore due to dehydration. I put the remote control in one of the upper drawers of the nearby credenza. Should I consult a psychologist or counselor about why I seem to have recklessly wrecked our lives and inflicted so much distress on others as well? Slowly, she admitted, "I'm trying to understand my actions that brought such destruction and suffering." Her fingers interlaced like a mass of snakes. "My aim is to meet with Stacy Collier." She took a risk speaking out. "I apologize for the damage I've caused her family." Towards me, she was compassionate. Laura contemplated the predicament, but I can't fathom why. She stared directly at the pattern in the solid tabletop. "It is her." I learned from Stacy that Brian had a regular acquaintance with a woman at his workplace for some time. She said she had grown accustomed to it, but she has now reached her limit. Brian is divorcing, and she's swiftly moving on with a man who adores her kids, cherishes her, and whom she views as the best thing to ever happen to her, leaving her overjoyed. I knew Stacy, who was in the midst of her own divorce proceedings and was aware of the new suitors in her life. Unbeknownst to me, Laura had sought forgiveness from Stacy. This indicated remorse and a willingness to accept responsibility for past actions. A spark of optimism stirred within me, making me ponder if there was any chance for reconciliation. I asked about the physician's advice. Upon spotting me, Laura quickly retreated to the tabletop. She admitted that no progress had been made. "If I could assure you we'd made progress, I would go to any lengths to make it happen. At this point, all I'm conscious of is an incident during my heavy drinking phase." "Did they give you medication, Laura?" I interrupted whatever you were saying. For the first time, you looked at me intensely, your eyes locked with mine. I couldn't read the whirlwind of emotions flashing across your face. "No, I'm not certain." That was her confession. It could be the first time I made a genuine connection during my sexual encounter with Brian. Indeed, I was intoxicated at the time. Yet, there were brief moments when I wasn't under the influence. After that incident, I didn't drink anymore. According to you, you cried again, trying to hide it. "It would be beneficial if I could employ that argument," she murmured softly. "However, I don't. During my discussion with my therapist, I am trying to unearth the real reasons for this." She only continued talking when I shifted positions in the chair. She had been silent for a while prior to this. "It is Mark." My eyebrows were raised and my chin was tilted up, showing curiosity. "Will you agree to meet her? She wants to converse with you, but first she wants to hear your thoughts. All she intends to do is ask some questions. She wishes to inquire about certain matters and see if she can uncover anything more. But I haven't been able to make this clear to her." The words that Laura spoke were a tangled knot of tension, colliding against each other. Before my outburst, she was trying to absorb everything before I started. It's possible that Laura seemed shocked when I said bluntly, "It's Lee." "Is it you?" she asked with deep emotion. I nonchalantly shrugged. "Isn't my husband still you?" I stated solemnly. "As long as it doesn't endanger our child, I will do everything in my power to help you." Though it almost slipped out that she was my child, I held back. Her eyes glowed with a shocking hope that intensified over time. My aim was to disillusion her about the slim chances of success. However, I hesitated. For the sake of my little daughter, I was prepared to explore virtually any viable option beneficial to her. Without hesitation, I deeply cared for Laura. My feelings towards her remain unchanged. Yet, love couldn't conquer rationality. I felt a strong sense of deception. If our divorce was imminent, that seemed to be the path predestined for us. Following a 6-month wait, it concluded. When my daughter stayed with me, I did not prohibit her mother from visiting. This has changed both during and after the divorce. Multiple attempts were made by Laura to reconcile, but the results were not what I desired. For relief, I was compelled to seek professional help as the pain became unbearable. It proved helpful. I reduced my work hours to spend more time with my daughter. In the subsequent year, Laura relocated to another town and wed an accountant there. My daughter was part of their marriage ceremony. Although invited, I opted not to attend the event. I didn't remarry, but instead dedicated my life solely to raising my daughter. Please share your thoughts on my story by commenting below.